यस भैया।
देखिए 45 के आसपास हो गया, 43 के आसपास हो गया।
स्टार्ट करना चाहिए मेरे।
हाँ, if the speaker confirm we can start.
विनय भैया।
हाँ हाँ,
स्टार्ट करें अपने प्रोग्राम भैया।
एकदम सर।
Good evening, friends. Now on behalf of WIPCA, today's program is reading feedback in
रोहित अनम्यूट कर ले। रोहित म्यूट होगी है वो, अनम्यूट कर ले।
आवाज आ रही भैया? हेलो।
नहीं, म्यूट है तुम्हारा रोहित।
म्यूट नहीं है भैया।
हाँ ठीक है, अब ठीक है, अब ठीक है।
हेलो।
हाँ, ओके ओके।
Good evening, friends. Now on behalf of WIPCA, I welcome to all the members and speakers. Today's program is ZD on prepack insolvency and new opportunity. Now I request to our president to proceed the program.
Thank you, Rohit, my younger brother, for giving me the opportunity to address the gathering on the Zoom. Friends, I, on behalf of association, welcome all of you to this very, very important and contemporary topic, which will be dealt by none other than my brother, Binayji Singhania. And of course, he will also deal with the lot of opportunity which this enactment has brought before us. In the form of valuation or in the form of insolvency professional or whatever form he will guide us. Friends, this prepack means pack before going somewhere, means there is a consent between the party before going for the insolvency proceedings. So before going to NCLT, we have to make a program before entering into that area of legal approvals. This is the what I understand with these words. Of course, as because learner speaker here, I should not speak much on that. But yeah, as a BIP president, I would like to just introduce I would like to inform our audience that, friends, we have the policy of benefaction for the young chartered accountants, in which we support the young chartered accountants in our BIP platforms. We have introduced a club award to this in this financial year, in this calendar year, for the purpose of members and their relatives. We are also bringing our directory with a unique feature of their area of interest and expertise, so that the actual network can be developed among ourselves and our knowledge bank become more strengthened. We are also bringing our mobile app, on which already test run has been done, and it is being dealt by Kavindra Chaudhary, one of our committee members, which will be very soon will be available to all of you. And we are also having a proposed date of annual conference on 10th of July at the ITC, subject to certain parameters which are under working, which will be finalized within 1 or 2 days. With these small remarks, I now hand over the proceedings to our chairman, very learning chairman and very hardworking chairman, to Prakash Patwari, for the next session, for the next proceedings. Thank you so much. Welcome, Binay Bhaiya.
Thank you.
Or Rohit, take it. Okay.
Thank you, Vishnu Bhaiya. Now I just introduce our speaker, Vinay Singhania ji. Vinay Singhania is a chartered accountant come insolvency professional. He is also a forensic auditor and member of ACFE USA. He is designated partner of AAA Insolvency Professional LLP. He has handled many cases under IBC and a regular columnist in newspaper and journal on IBC. He has also handled litigation cases against DEO, ED under IBC as RP or liquidator. Now I request to our speaker Vinay Singhania ji to proceed the program.
Good evening, friends. It's my privilege to be part of the IPCA for the seminar on EIRP, that is Prepack Insolvency Resolution Process. It's a newly conceptualized by the IBBI, although it was in the limelight for a year or so, but the IPCA is always on the forefront to discuss on all such matters which are of interest of the profession, CA profession as well as IP. So first of all, I thank President VIPCA, Mr. Vishnu Tulsian, my brother, as well as Mr. Vivek Banka, Mr. Rohit Kejriwal, Mr. Prakash Patwari, and all my friends in the VIPCA for giving me a platform to discuss the matter on my favorite subject of insolvency. So uh, this PIRP, I'm calling this pre-pack insolvency resolution process as a PIRP. Earlier, this was a CIRP, that is corporate insolvency resolution process. So with the same name, it has become PIRP now. So I'm coming to pre-pack insolvency directly, and I'm sharing the screen. My screen sharing is visible. PPT is visible.
No, sir, not visible now. Not
Okay.
visible. It's okay now.
Okay, now. So first of all, I'd like to explain the salient features of the PIRP. This PIRP is only for the MSME. MSME is the micro, small, and medium enterprise. And the basic concept of this PIRP that MSME is the sector who are having much of the business and who are having means whenever there is a trouble in the MSME sector, nobody else will be there in a position to take over the MSME because it's a small enterprise and the public may not be aware of this enterprise. So the debtor itself, the company itself will be, and the promoter itself will be in a better position to take over uh, the enterprise at a reduced reduced amount of the loan. So the process is a quicker one as compared to CIRP is only 120 days, or you may say only 90 days. It is a cost effective, and the city will be as a going concern. It will continue as a going concern without the hassles of CIRP, that is the company is going into the hands of the RP. So here in the PIRP, the company will remain in the hands of the promoters. So the implementation speed, that's what we were discussing a little earlier. The PIRP started, the act was given on 4th of April, and within 5 days, on 9th of April, there was a regulation for the complete details of the PIRP process, as well as the notification was issued for the amount which has to be covered, that is 10 lakhs and more. So the basic amount of any enterprise for going to the PIRP is 10 lakhs. There is no higher limit for that one, but the minimum limit has been given as 10 lakhs. Earlier there were chapters 1, 2, 3 to 7 chapters were there. So now for the PIRP, a special chapter 3A has been introduced with section 54A to 54B has been inducted, and it started with only for the PIRP. What is the need and rationale of introducing the PIRP? As we know, earlier in case of any NPA account or any default, there were earlier two process only, which were supervised by the court, which is one is the IBC, that is CIRP, and the another one is a scheme of compromise and arrangement. Now also the IBC is still there, with the PIRP is also added therein, and the scheme of compromise and arrangement was also there, and is still continuing. The other than court driven area, we have two other forms in the by way of RBI Prudential Framework. RBI Prudential Framework is only for the accounts who are controlled by the RBI, and where the amount of the default is more than 1,500 crores. So the it's only for the big cats, not for the smaller ones. And other than this, there is an informal understanding between a debtor and the creditor. You can say by way of ODS or restructuring. So these are the things like one will ask, why should I go for the PIRP, and what is the benefit of going to PIRP, and what are the other options available? So we have the other options available by way of CIRP. That is a much tougher one. And and we have the scheme of compromise and arrangement. And other than out of court, we have RBI Prudential Framework, that is only for the bigger ones, and by way of restructuring or so
फेसबुक को लेके उसको सोशल मीडिया हो गया ना, वो डायरी जो इलेक्शन डायरी है, एक बार जस्ट स्टडी कर लो, और इलेक्शन की जो फाइल है ना अपने पास में, मुझे नहीं पता,
suitable for everyone, and the my your arrangement as I stated earlier, this is only for yeah. So scheme of compromise and arrangement, this requires each class of creditor should approve this scheme of compromise or arrangement with 75% voting share. So it's not like a CIRP or PIRP where 66% voting share is required. It requires voting share of 75%, and in each class, if say a creditor is there, there will be a separate class for the creditor. If a government dues are there, there will be a separate class for the government creditor. And if a if an unsecured loan is there, there will be a separate class for the unsecured loan. If a debenture is there, there will be a separate class for each class of creditor. There will be approval from 75% of the creditors or members. So it's a very tough thing. As regards CIRP or PIRP is concerned, only 66% voting share is required. So section 230 is being accepted, but it's in the rare cases. As regards RBI prudential norm, we have already mentioned that it's only for 1,500 crores and above. So it may not be of interest for many. As regards ODS is concerned, ODS is there. It's not a new thing, but ODS has many things which are negative. Negative in the sense there is not a single time limit. It may be completed within a few months, or it may take years or so. Thereafter, ODS has to be approved by the higher authorities of the bank, and which need many preconditions which may not be approved. Thereafter, the ODS is only out of court settlement. Out of court settlement means whatever banks is accepting, that is not confirmed by the court, and there is no moratorium for the ODS. During the course of moratorium, there is no system that other creditor will stop. So in case of ODS, everyone, when someone is aware of that ODS is going on, everyone will take their extreme step, either by way of SARFAESI or by way of litigation or by way of going through the High Court or even by way of going to the CIRP. So since there is no moratorium, ODS will not be mentioned. Is not a favorite thing as of today after coming to the PIRP. So the PIRP becomes the most viable and the most acceptable point for the purpose of resolution of the NPA account or resolution of the account with default. So now we are coming to the criteria, eligibility criteria of the PIRP, PPIRP. As I explained that it should be a MSME. MSME means micro, small or medium enterprise. If we come to micro, small or medium enterprise, in the definition has been given by the MSME in the ODM registration itself, and as per section 8 of the ODM registration is mentioned that investment in plant and machinery should be 1 crore and turnover should not be more than 5 crore. Then it is a micro, and similarly it is 10 crore and 50 crore for a small, and medium enterprise it is for 50 crore and 250 crore. Now what is the way when can we say that investment in plant and machinery is 1 crore or 10 crore? So how to calculate this 1 crore or 10 crore? This is very simple. As regards UDM is concerned, you have to take only the last filed income tax return. From the last filed income tax return, you have to see whether it is 1 crore or 10 crore or 50 crore or more. So it's only on the basis of the WDB given in the ITR. So that is also very clear. And as regards turnover is concerned, turnover criteria has to be taken from GST department, from the GST returns. From the GST return, we are filing every year return, and whatever turnover is there, that should be accounted for as a turnover for the purpose of MSME. Now we can say whether if a person is having turnover of 1,000 crore, whether that can be included as MSME or not. Because as regards this MSME law is concerned, turnover should not exceed 250 crore. But as regards this MSME is concerned, there is one criteria, there is one thing, exceptional thing is there. If there is export turnover, then the export turnover should not be counted as the turnover for the purpose of MSME. So if you have say 1,000 crore turnover, out of which 800 crore turnover is of the export, then your turnover will be counted only 200 crore. Similarly, in the investment in plant and machinery, if there is a plant and machinery in by way of pollution control, pollution machineries which controls the pollution, then those machineries are excluded from taking into consideration of this 50 crore or 250 crore. Thereafter, as I mentioned earlier, that city must commit a default of rupees 10 lakh. What is the definition of this one? If we go through default, it does not mean it never means NPA. Default means if I have to pay something and I have to pay something on a particular date and I could not pay that amount on that particular date. So if I say, let's say for example, on 1st of June 2021, I had to pay 50 lakhs rupees and I could not pay 50 lakhs to bank. And thereafter, on 5th of June, I have paid 50 lakhs. So whether that will be counted as default, since the default was there on 1st of June, but as on date, till the date when I am filing this one, if the default has been made good, and if the default has been vanished, whatever default was there that was made good, so that default will not be counted. Only the default which is there, which is still persisting as of day, has to be counted. Now one can say if a default is there to say 20%, and no single default is more than 10 lakhs. So whether it can be counted now as per this definition of the default of the PIRP, the default has to be 10 lakhs. It's not mentioned of a one particular person or of say 100 or 200 persons. So cumulatively, if the default is more than 10 lakhs, then it will be considered as default for the purpose of PIRP. Thereafter, the CIRP should not have undergone PIRP or completed CIRP during the last 3 years. It means that CD should not take it on granted that whenever they need, they can go for the PIRP and start the moratorium, because as soon as the PIRP starts, there is a moratorium. Moratorium starts, and whatever cases are lying against the company that are being set aside, that are stopped. So just for the sake of stopping the or just for the sake of taking out of all the litigations, one may start PIRPs. And just to avoid all such cases where the PIRP can be started only once in a period of 3 years, or if the CIRP was completed, then also that period should have crossed 3 years. So there should be a minimum gap of 3 years, either by your PIRP or CIRP. And if the company has gone into liquidation, then it can never be started because the company has already gone into liquidation. Similarly, no other this 29A defaulter, if a willful defaulter is there, then a person who is having a willful defaulter cannot install the PIRP. For this, a particular declaration is required to be made, and the CD will, directors of the CD will make the particular declaration in this regard. Calculation of the turnover, I have already mentioned that as per GST, that should be taken. Now, whether the registration is mandatory in Udyam, as far as law is concerned, law is very clear that it should be classified as MSME, but nowhere it is mentioned that it should be mandatory. It's mandatory required to be registered under Udyam. Even if you go to the form 1 of NCLT, which is required to be filed along with the application for the PIRP, there is a mention at point number 8 that it should be the Udyam certificate registration certificate should be enclosed herein, or otherwise if the Udyam registration is not there, then other documents which clarify that we are into this MSME, that can be given. But as regards, I have attended a few seminars with the IBBI, and the IBBI directors have mentioned that Udyam registration is mandatory, although it's not mentioned in either in the rules or regulation or the act, but they have mentioned it is mandatory. Although if anything has to be mentioned, it has to be through act only. No, nothing can be mentioned outside the act. But as regards Udyam registration is concerned, is the Udyam registration is very simple, and if we opt for getting registration of the Udyam, it won't take more than 3 to 4 times. So now one can ask that whether a trader will also be qualifying under MSME. So this is also clarified with under the MSME Act only, that enterprise means a company or is a business organization which is involved in the manufacturing of the thing or in the providing of the services. So traders are not included in the definition of enterprise. So MSME will not cover traders. So we cannot opt for PIRP in case of traders. Now, as we have already, we all know that PIRP is a process of only 120 days. Now, what is 120 days? 120 days has been divided into 2 parts. Number 1 is a submission of the resolution plan. Once the PIRP has been admitted to the PIRP by NCLT, from that date to within a period of 90 days, it must be the resolution plan must be submitted with the AA. And thereafter, AA will take approximately 30 days. So 120 days are given into 2 parts, 90 days and 30 days. So actual PIRP process is only of 90 days, because after submission of the resolution plan, we don't have anything to say. Only AA will take a decision whether to accept or not. Now, whether it is only a period of 90 days, to my mind, it is not a period of 90 days only. It is a period of 240 days approximately. How come? Because once the PIRP starts, or once the PIRP has been admitted, from the day PIRP is admitted, we have to complete a few things. And before start of the PIRP, the resolution professional has to take charge, and only the resolution professional will file all other documents with the AA. So how come the resolution professional will take charge? The resolution professional will take charge once he is appointed. So he has to be appointed prior to start of the PIRP. So prior to start of the PIRP, I can say that at least 90 days prior to start of the PIRP, the process should start. And it's also mentioned in the law also that when the process is started, how can one say that a process is started? The process can be started after taking a special resolution and the declaration from the consent from the directors that they want to opt for the PIRP. For that, they have to file MGT 14 also with the MCA, that they have taken the special resolution from the members for going to the PIRP. So from that date to 90 days, within a period of 90 days, they have to file a application with the executing authority, that the NCLT, that we want to start this PIRP. So within 90, before admission of the PIRP, they have to appoint a resolution professional. They have to prepare a base plan. They have to convince the bankers that I have prepared so and so resolution plan, and the bankers should meet twice or thrice, not only for the base resolution plan, but also for the appointment of the resolution professional. Then only PIRP can be filed, and once an application is filed, then at least 30 days will be taken by the executing authority for admission of the case. It won't be taking much of time, because there is no delay on account of the CD, because CD itself is filing. So CD will not create any hazards for that one. So I think in the very first meeting, or in the very first proceeding, or second hearing, the case will be admitted. So we have taken into account those 30 days prior to that one. So 120 days will be taken prior to start of the PIRP, and thereafter 120 days for after the start of the PIRP. So in aggregate, we can say that this is a process of 240 days and not of 90 days as stated in the law. As I mentioned earlier, that base resolution plan, which should be prepared by the city and submitted to the FC, and FC will take a longer time. Not only that, we have to get a declaration by the majority of the directors and the special region by the members, that also already we have discussed. Now there is a concept of base resolution plan. What is this base resolution? Base resolution plan is a plan which is prepared by the city, promoter of the city themselves. They can prepare the plan either singly or jointly with other investors. They may have some investors with them who want to take participation in the business, and they will prepare a base resolution plan. And this resolution plan has to be submitted before the financial creditor who are unrelated. Related parties, financial creditors have no say, and the related party operational creditors have no say. Only the COC will consist of only the unrelated party financial creditors. So this base resolution plan has to be submitted before the unrelated financial creditor. They will see it, and thereafter they will agree that we want to go for the PIRP process. At least 66% of the unrelated financial creditors should agree that we want to go for the PIRP process. So this base resolution plan takes longer time, and we can have a say for that one also, because resolution plan cannot be prepared by the CD or promoter themselves. They need our help, and as a consultant, we can provide a few of our insights for preparing for this plan. What are the contents of the resolution plan? The contents of the resolution plan is the list of claims. The list of claims is prepared by the city themselves, and they will hand over the copy of the list of claim and the declaration on avoidable transactions of PUFE. PUFE is a preferential undervalued for fraudulent and extortion transactions. So those declarations will always be there, and they have to prepare that declaration. Then before start of the PIRP, they have to make a declaration for PUFE. Now one can say whether, if in case any PUFE transaction is there, then whether the PIRP can start. Now PUFE transaction, one can start the PIRP even after the PUFE transaction. The only thing is we have to mention in our application that a few transactions are there which are of the nature of preferential transaction. Now, under what circumstances these preferential transactions have occurred? the preferential transactions might have occurred like I have a land, I have a factory building, I have a collateral security in my hand, which is not in the core area of the business, but I have a separate assets in my hand, and due to defaults in the company, due to losses in the company, I had to sell out the land or the other assets to other persons at a lower rate. There may be instances that I have sold out the land of say 100 rupees at say 90 rupees or say 100 or say lesser than 100 rupees. It may be that in many transactions the market value of the property is say 100 rupees, but as regards when we are going for the registration, the registration charges is being taken at 120 rupees. So all those transactions are under the category of preferential transaction. So if I undervalued or preferential transaction is there, then also we can opt for the PIRP subject to this idea has been mentioned in our form itself, and it will be accepted by the AA. But if we have done any fraud, like say if we have certain assets stock in our books of account, but actually the assets the stock is very less or is negligible or not at all available in our end, then all those fraudulent transactions will not be covered. In those cases, it will be better that we should not go for the PIR. So the documents required is a normal document, is a usual document, and anyone can prepare that one. Only thing is preliminary, all those documents are kept in handy, and it should be given to the bankers and the other financial creditors before the start of the PIR. So all those documents are the part of the base resolution plan, and this base resolution plan should be placed before the unrelated financial creditors. Now, who will appoint the RP? That is a resolution professional here. The RP will be appointed by the financial creditors, and who will propose? The financial creditor having the value of more than 10% can propose the name of the RP, and RP name has to be approved by more than 66% of the financial creditors who are unrelated. So once the RP is appointed, then only we can start. And who can be an RP as regards CIRP is concerned is the same way manner. He should be an independent person. He should not be a auditor of the CD for last 3 years or so, and he should not be a consultant for the CD. If the total value of the income earning from the consultancy charge from the CD is more than 5%, he should not be recruited as RP. Other than that, if he is eligible to be an independent director of the company, he can be appointed as RP here. Duties of the RP is very well mentioned herein, and it's all the same like the CIRP. But the only thing is we have to, as a RP, he has to file with the executive authority in a shorter time, within 2 days, within 3 days. All those compliances have to be made. The compliances can be made only by the with the help of the CD only, and the CD will be preparing the list of claims, the list of creditors, and the base resolution plan. All those resolution plan and the list of creditors and other details are to be submitted within a period of 2 days to the executive authority of the appointment of the RP by the NCLT. Now, fee of the resolution provision. This is the vital thing which we always look for. What should be the fees? The fee has to be can be divided into 4 parts. Number 1 is the fee for the duty before start of the PIRP by AA. So before start of the PIRP, insolvency professional will act as RP therein. So he has to charge some fees, and thereafter, whatever fees is there, that fee, even before start of the PIRP by the AA, that fee will, and all the appointment of the professionals and other persons by the RP will form part of the PIRP cost. Fee and expenses incurred by the RP will be part of this one. And the COC may impose the limit and the conditions, like what would be the maximum amount of the fee and what are the conditions under which the fee can be incurred. That can be that can be mentioned by the COC in the meeting, and we have to abide by that one. We cannot go beyond that one. And thereafter COC will be ratifying the fee once the PIRP process will be started. So the ratification will be there. Now this ratification may not be required because the actual the appointment of the resolution professional is done by the financial creditor only with a majority of 66%. Once the appointment is already done, thereafter whenever the appointment is done, the fee and other structures are already talked about. So after start of the PIRP, again in the COC meeting we have to get it approved and we have to ratify from the COC member. So there is no need for that one, but I don't feel any harm also because the financial creditor were already agree to that one, so they will agree after also. Now, whether when the CD fails to file the application, let's say within 90 days we have to file with the AA that we are going for the PIRP, and if for any reason, let's say due to non-preparation of the document or due to say non-acceptance by the bankers or by the unsecured financial creditors, it could not be filed. Then whatever fee is accruing to the RP, that will be borne by the CD, and he will be paying it directly to the RP, and the banker will not be involved here. For the fee, there will be separate bank account, like a escrow account. Whatever fee and whatever other expenses are notified or accumulated or budgeted by the RP, all those expenses and all those fees will be kept in a separate bank account, which may be under the control of the RP or which may be in the control of the CD, but there should be a separate bank account, and it will benefit the RP in smooth functioning because he will not be worrying whether the fee will be paid by the CD or not. RP shall disclose cost at the time of usual requirement, so there is nothing as such. So pre-packaged insolvency resolution process cost. What should be the process cost? So the amount of the interim finance, if any interim finance is raised during the course of the PIRP, that will also be part of the PIRP cost. Then the fee payable to any person to resolution, as I explained earlier, that will also be forming part of this one. And if any of the professional is appointed by the RP, that will also form part of the PIRP cost. Any cost incurred at the expense of the government to facilitate, that will also be forming part of the PIRP cost, and any other expenses that will. So this is the PIRP cost, and in case any of the cost which is incurred and is the PIRP is not succeeded, then the cost will be borne by the CD only, and no contribution will be sought from any other person, whether it be a bank or unrelated financial creditor or other person. So in that way, the professional will be having a good time because they will be getting their money from the CD itself. And in case the company switches goes to the CIRP, then whatever PIRP cost is there, that will be forming part of the CIRP cost. So that will also be covering that one. So as regards filing of application to NCLT for PIRP, there is a separate rule has been created for PIRP rules, and it was also promulgated on 9th of June. And this is clearly mentions what is the form and what requirements are there. So this filing of application has to be done by CD only, and consent of the RP is also required to be included here. So the filing fees for filing the application is 15,000 rupees. That is a obvious one. In case the FC is not there, there may be case that there is no FC in the company. In those cases, the OC will be taking charge. So what will be the OC doing? The highest most OC, which are not more than 10 in number, then topmost OC will be taking charge of the FC, and they will be deciding whether the PIRP should be started or not. So whatever COC member has to take control, has to take a decision, that will be taken by the 10 topmost OC along with the employee associations person, and one person from the employee and one person from the workman. So in the PIRT regulation, there are forms which are mentioned from P1 to P14, and this is a very nice way to establish that every person or every PIRP case should adhere to the norms. So these forms are mentioned that at which stage which form has to be used. It will give a clear picture to other persons who are not involved in the company. So IBPI will be having a good control by way of these forms. So for written consent, there is a written consent of the RP. There is a form number P1 for declaration by the directors or members. The form number P6 is there. The approval of the initiation of the PIRP, which is the wider one. And this is the only way when the PIRP process may fail for admission. So the 66% of the financial creditor should accept that PIRP should commence. So this decision has to be taken by the unsecured financial creditor, and it will be taken in form number P4. Now, now we come to admission of the application. So after filing the application with the AA with NCLT, there is no time limit given to NCLT, and we are hoping that within a period of 30 days, 1 or 2 hearing, the NCLT will be accepting the admission, and the admission will be there. And NCLT will simply see whether there is any deficiency in the documents filed or not, and if there is any PUFE transaction or not, if any disciplinary actions are going ahead against the RP or not, and whether the RP is having a AFA or not. So only those things which are to be looked after by NCLT, and no other things are to be looked after. So it's a smooth process for the NCLT, and they will simply accept on the given guideline. So as I explained earlier, the process timeline is before start of the PIRP it is 120 days, and after start of the PIRP it is 120 days, and even after completion of 240 days, there will be a few work like intimation to all the creditors that this PIRP has concluded and NCLT has accepted this resolution plan. So this has to be communicated to all the creditors within a period of 7 days. So it's a timeline of 247 days. Although prior we have taken only 90 plus 20 days, 90 plus 30 days, that is 120 days, but it may be longer also, because as soon as we are filing with the AA, we are just assuming that it will be accepted within a period of 30 days. But as usual, as we have seen earlier also, there is no mandatory requirement. There is no mandatory that RP that the AA should accept the application within a given time frame. It's only a recommendatory thing. So they may take longer time also. So as regards timeline, as I have mentioned, how can we how we have calculated this one, that before start of the PIRP, we have the CD has to prepare a list of the creditors and the base resolution plan and up to date financial statement of the CD. Up to date financial statement means up to last year of the 31st March, they have to prepare a financial statement which is audited one, and thereafter up to current date, which should not be more than 14 days. Within a period of 14 days, the financial statement should be prepared. Although it may not be audited one, but it should be prepared and it should be kept ready. Thereafter, a declaration of the majority of the directors should be there. A special resolution of the by the members approving the filing of the PIRP application should be there, and the MGT 14 should be filed before the ROC. Notice of the meeting of approval of the FC for filing of application. At least 5 days notice has to be given. We are assuming that 4 such meetings are required. It may be that instead of 4, there may be there will be 4, 5, 6 meetings may be there, because usually what we have seen from the earlier records, bankers usually take longer time, not only for approval, but also they need approval from their higher authorities also. So they used to take longer time, and we have to convince the bankers and the third persons that if we are not going for the PIRP, then the company may go into deeper rate, and there will be less chance for recovery than the present position. Then we have to take approval of the FC not less than 66% of the date for filing the PIRP application in Form P4 and for approving appointment of RP in Form P3 along with the terms of appointment. So these things are required prior to filing of the application with the AA. Then after this one, we have to prepare a report that the city has met all the requirements, and as usual, fee has to be given of 15,000 rupees, and thereafter, once it is filed, then the AA will take time, and since there is no litigation from the CD, usually what we have seen in the CIRP cases, the CD never appears in the first or second hearing, and after first or second hearing, they ask for the filing of the affidavit, then they file the rejoinder for that one. They used to take time, and they used to create others, and we have seen that at the time of admission, even 2 years or more have elapsed for the purpose of admission of the CIRP cases. Even in my case, one of the application was filed in January 19, and as of today, the company is not admitted, and the case is going on. This is only because of the CD usually takes time, and they usually have one thing in common. They clearly mention that we are in negotiation with the bank, and will be going to settle the case. And since the settlement will be there, the CIRP should not be initiated. Otherwise, we will be in red. So on this particular ground, usually NCLB provides not less than 2 to 3 hearings. And in my case, this particular clause has given more than 6 to 7 hearings has been given only for this settlement process. So this is the usual process at NCLB for the CIRP. But in case of PIRP, no such case will be there, because the debtor itself, promoter themselves are going for that one. So there won't be any delay for that one. Now we have mentioned the timeline. We have to file public announcement as a RP within a period of 2 days only. Now the public announcement is not required to file with is not required to be published on the newspaper. It can be given only to the IBBI website, as well as any of the website of the CD, if any, and other places which may be required, but not as per CIRP. It's not required to be given to the newspaper. The basic reason for not going to the public announcement is that the list of creditors is already prepared by the CD, by the promoters. And if any deficiency, if any discrepancies are there, that discrepancy can be rectified by the RP because once the list of creditors are available, then the RP has to write to every creditor that this is the amount which is owed to you as per the company personnel and the company records. If you have any other amount, so you have to mention, and if any changes are required, the list can be updated at any point of time. So the list of creditors is already there. So claims, public announcement of claims for acceptance of claim is not required therein. And the submission of base resolution plan has also to be done within a period of 2 days only. Like if on 1st of June someone is appointed as RP, then by 3rd of June he has to file all these three, 4 things, that we have to file base resolution plan, because the base resolution plan is already filed, and the copy of which is already given to the RP, and the list of claim is already filed. So all those things have to be given to AA, to executing authority, within a period of 2 days only. Thereafter, the valuer has to be appointed by the RP within a period of 3 days only, and the COC constitution has to be done within a period of 7 days. If I say that on 1st of June, the PRP has started, then by 8th of June, within a period of 7 days, the constitution of COC will be there. And if any objection of the creditors or other things are there, it should be within a period of 2 days. Then the first meeting should be there within a period of 14 days only. So we can see how fast we are moving. As regards CRP is concerned, CRP used to take 30 days, and here in the PRP, we are just concluding everything within a period of 14 days only. Finalization of information memorandum. Information memorandum is not a tough task here, because preliminary information memorandum was already prepared by the CD, and the copy of which is handed over to the RP, and all the details which are required in the information memorandum are already given in the preliminary information memorandum, and this is a usual one. If the financial creditor asks for any further detail, those details can be included therein once the information memorandum is made available to them. If any changes in the COC is there, then whenever a change is notified, is given to a RP, then within a period of 2 days, those changes are to be made, and it has to be notified to AA also that these changes are there, and whatever change in constitution of the COC is there, that should be done. The only benefit which is given here, once the constitution of the COC is changing, whatever prior decision has been taken, all those decisions will be valid, and no decision will be changed due to change in the constitution of the COC. And if any invitation to public at large, if the base resolution plan is not accepted, or if the bankers or if the financial creditor is asking for more resolution plan, then it has to be published in a period of 21 days of the start of the PRP. So if it has to be published within a period of 21 days, and within a period of 15 days only, the resolution plan should come from the prospective resolution applicants. So the time period given here is only 15 days, which used to be more than 30 days. So this is the basic difference, where we are expecting that not only the company, not only the promoter, not only the resolution professional, but also the persons who are interested, who may be interested in that company, will be taking lesser time, and that will be having some positive impact for completion of the PRP within a given time frame. As regards avoidance transaction, PUFE transactions, so we can say that it's the ODF. Opinion has to be made by RP within a period of 30 days from the date of start of the PRP, and within 45 days there has to be a determination. ODF, O is for opinion, D is for determination. Within 45 days there has to be a determination, and within 60 days filing should be there. So the time period given is only 30, 45, and 60 days. So whether a transaction auditor is required to be appointed, the law is silent on this one. Even during the course of during the CRP also, there is nothing mentioned for the transaction auditor, but it is for the RP only to take a stand and to appoint the auditor. So this appointment should also be there prior to start of the CRP, so that the transaction auditor can complete his work, and this time frame can be maintained. Now, submission of resolution plan to AA after approval of a COC. This is the final time. within a period of 90 days from the date of the start of the PIRP, the resolution plan should be submitted for approval to the COC. If it is not so, then the company will automatically, the process will automatically be terminated by the AA. So this is the change here, because no extension is mentioned in PIRP cases. Now, as regards AA time is here. AA is also given a time frame of only 30 days, but we are of the opinion that AA or the NCLT will never go through that one, and they will take their own time outside the law also. As we have seen in the case of CRP also, they used to take their usual time. But the only thing that one thing which is for the benefit of us, only 10 days back or 15 days back, NCLT, all the members of the NCLT and as well as this bar association has filed a case with Supreme Court that there is a vacancy of more than 30 to 40% of the people. So NCLT should be filled up at a speedy manner. So whatever process is there for induction of the NCLT member, NCLT president, because one NCLT bench is going to set up at Chennai, that should also start. So for this process, for this one petition has been filed with the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has directed to MCA to look into the fact and start the process as quickly as possible. Although no time frame is given, but it should be on the positive side. And one more thing is, a few persons are there who are going to retire within June 2021. So all those persons who are going to retire, all those judicial members and technical members who are going to retire in June 2021 are being given 5 years extension time, and it will help us in NCLT that our cases will not be prolonged. Otherwise, if the number of members are lesser on each and every day, then the persons will be then we will be in soup. So now whether RP can have a management in PIRP. As we have seen in the PIRP, the most beneficial point of PIRP is the custody and control of the company remains with the promoter. The RP does not take custody and control, and it remains with the existing promoter, and they used to carry on the business as usual. But only in extreme cases, when the COC member is of the opinion that there is a gross negligence or any fraudulent activities is going on, then they may accept, they may resolve with a 66% voting share that the management of the city should rest with RP. Now, if they agree to this particular proposition under Section 54CA, then also they have to go through the NCLT only. They cannot take decision on their own. They can pass a resolution, but it has to be approved by the PIR, that is the NCLT, that whether the management should go to the RP or not. But there is a law. As per the law, the management of the company under the PIRP can also go to the RP, to avoid any gross negligence or fraudulent activity. Now the moratorium will start as soon as the PIRP admission is there at the NCLT. The moratorium will start. One thing I just forgot to mention. If a case is going on under Section 7, 9, or 10 before NCLT, as on the date of the start of this act on 4th of April 2021, or as on today, then what will be the fate? Under Section 54C, we have to file the application for this one. So whether 54C will be there or the existing Section 54, 7, 9, or 10 will be there. So as regards the promulgation of the act is there on 4th of April 2021. If any case is pending before the NCLT under Section 7, 9, or 10, that will be heard first of all, and a decision will be taken. And if the decision is there not to accept, then the PIRP will be start. Otherwise, the PIRP process will not start. Means the PIRP application will not be heard. But as regards 4th of April is a 2 months back thing now. We are as of today, we are on 10th of June. So we just forget about 4th of April. As of now, if any process, if any case is pending before the NCLT under section 7, 9 or 10, whether those cases should be heard first, or if we are filing a case under section 54C for PIRP, then which will be heard first. It is clarified here that if a section 7, 9 or 10 application is pending before the CIRP, before the NCLT, and within a period of 14 days, if we are filing an application for PIRP under section 54C, then the 54C application will be disposed of first. And if the 54C application will be disposed of by way of admission of the PIRP, then all those cases will be cancelled, and the PIRP process will start. And if the 54C will be rejected for any ground like unavailability of the required document, then this 54C application will be rejected, and the section 7, 9 or 10 application will continue. So the process will start for them all. So it's mentioned herein that whichever process will be having veto power over other thing. So the moratorium will start under once the PIRP process is started, the AA will announce name of the resolution applicant and name of the resolution professional, as well as the moratorium will start as on the date of the admission of the PIRP only. So duties of the RP, as I mentioned earlier, that we have to prepare the list of the claims which is already there with the CD and promoters of the CD, and we just have to check whether those claims are complete one or not. We have to intimate to each, and as RP has to intimate each claimant that this is the amount of claim which is in our record, and we have to RP has to inform the AA with the report which has to be prepared, and the RP has to inform the AA about the fraudulent transactions, if any, under section 43, 45, 49, 50, 66 also. And the powers of RP is to be seen. RP won't be having custody and control of the assets of the CD. So what is the role of the RP? The role of the RP is only of the monitoring. RP will only monitor the CD whether the CD is doing the work as required by the COC member, and in the interest of the business and in the interest of the existing creditors. If any earlier payments are there before start of the PIRP, whether those payments can continue, of course that will continue, because there is no change in the business pattern. Whatever business is going on, the promoter will carry on the business as usual without looking into the fact that the PIRP has started. The basic concept is PIRP should continue as if there is no negative remark. So the whatever earlier payments are there, that earlier payment will carry on, and RP will have the power to access the books of account, will have the power to see to attend the board meetings, to attend the position, whatever COC meetings are there, and to abide by the COC limits, COC directions that is being given by the COC members to the CD or the promoter, that has to be abided by. The RP may have to appoint a accountant person, legal or other professional as may be required for smooth conducting of the business and for smooth submission of the reports to the AA. I think we are getting short of time. I can't pass that. So if we compare the pre-package insolvency resolution process with the CIRP process, now, and this is the vital thing. If we look into the CIRP and the PIRP. Why CIRP? Why PIRP and not CIRP? So what are the differences between them? The major difference is PIRP is with the consent of the promoters, shareholders, directors, and the financial creditors. Everyone has given their consent beforehand. Before start of the PIRP, they have consented that they want to start the PIRP. As regards CIRP is concerned, CIRP is never consented by the promoter directors. So there is a chances of litigation in the CIRP which is not there in the PIRP. So less litigation will be there. PIRP is a mix of the judicial and consensual process. It is judicial also as well as consensual also. Whereas in the CIRP is only a judicial. There is no consensus at all. The CD remains under the control and management of the promoters and not the RP and the PIRP. The CD has the first right, which is not there in the case of CIRP. In the PIRP, CD has the right to prepare a waste resolution plan, and that waste resolution plan will be accepted by the sector financial creditor or unrelated financial creditor. And if any other plan is there, then that will be completed with the waste resolution plan. Whereas in case of CIRP, the promoters are never given any chance for preparation of any resolution plan. And even if they prepare any resolution plan, we have seen that the financial creditor usually not go with that resolution plan which is prepared by the promoter, because they don't want to give the company into the same hand who has incurred loss to the bankers earlier. In principle, approval of the financial creditor is already there, because base resolution plan is already given before the financial creditor, and they have accepted with 66% of the majority that the PIRP should start. So this plan is already there. The process time is as regards CIRP, it is 180 days, 270 days, and even we have seen that not only 270 days, it is going beyond 370 days. As per the last information which is there, the average time taken during the CIRP cases is 378 days. So under the CIRP, there is a concept of IRP and RP, whereas no such concept is there under PIRP. There is only one concept of RP, although there is a power given to the COC member to change the RP, but it's not mentioned in the law, but they can change the RP at any point of time. Consent of the FC for appointment of RP is already there, which is there in the CIRP, but CIRP used to change after the start of the CIRP, whereas here it is given prior to start of the PIRP. If PIRP fails, in case of CIRP, if the CIRP fails, it will automatically go to the liquidation. Whereas under PIRP, if the PIRP fails, it will never go to liquidation. There is only exceptional circumstances when it can go to liquidation. That will be only because of the in cases where the fraudulent transactions are there, PUFE transactions are there, which are willful in nature, which are fraudulent in nature. Then if the RP will approach to the NCLT that so and so willful transactions or fraudulent transactions are there, and the case should be taken directly to the liquidation, in those cases only the case can be directly taken to the liquidation. Otherwise, if the due to resolution plan is not approved, then the PIRP will fail and it will be terminated. And whatever earlier process was there, earlier thing was there, that will continue. So there is no fault that if the PIRP fails, it will go to the liquidation. No filing of claims by the creditors, because it's already there with the CD, and the CD will provide you everything. CD will provide you all the help, and that will also give you a benefit by way of assessing whether any willful or other transactions are there or not. So in that way, PIRP is a smooth process as compared to the CIRP process. Yes, we have already discussed about the list of claim, the details. promoters will continue to have the management. So the outside people who are not aware of the company's current position, they may continue. They will not be in a position to know if the company is going into PIRP or not. So there is no stigma that the company is into red and this CRP is going on. So no such things are there. So authorized representative is there. That is also in the same way like in the CRP. There is no change in that one. And invitation of resolution plan. This invitation of resolution plan is not required if the base resolution plan is accepted. If the base resolution plan has no impairment, whatever amount is outstanding as on the date of the start of the PIRP, as on the date of the preparation of the list of creditors, if everything is being paid in the base resolution plan, then there is no need for any further plan, and the FC will accept those plan and that particular plan, and the base resolution plan will be accepted, and the things will be moving in the right direction. But in case there is any impairment, and if the impairment is of the OC will include the government creditors, government outstanding also. If there is any impairment, then the FC cannot accept the base resolution plan. The FC will ask for the resolution plan from the other people also, from the public also, and for that public invitation should be there, and within a period of 21 days the public announcement should be there, invitation of resolution plan should be there, and within a period of 36 days from the date of start of the CRP, the resolution plan should come to us, should come to the CD, and the RP should take note of that one. And in case the resolution plan is significantly better, now there is a concept of the significantly better resolution plan. So this concept was not there in the CRP case, and this is altogether a new concept. What is meaning by significantly better resolution plan? Let's say COC will take a decision which plan has to be taken as the significantly better and which plan should not be taken as a significantly better. They may come out a scoring pattern that if a person is paying 100% to this UC, 100% to the FC, 100% to the other creditors, then it will be having so much score. If they are reducing the percentage, if they are reducing the payment to the other persons, then the score will be lesser. Then when the score will be lesser amount, say let's say score is coming to say 50, and if the other person's public invitation of resolution plan, the score of the resolution plan submitted by the public is say 55 or say 60. If it is more than 10%, if it is more than 5%, or if it is more than 15%, whatever criteria, that criteria has to be decided by the COC members. If they decide that this amount will be, this score will be considered as significantly better. So if the significantly better resolution plan is there, then they can accept the resolution plan outright without going through the promoter, without going to the resolution plan submitted at the time of filing of the PIRP, and simply they can accept that one. The reason for having this particular concept is promoters are aware of that. If they are aware of that my base plan is there and I will be taking under the Swiss resolution package, Swiss method, then whatever other resolution plan will be coming, and that plan has to match with my plan, and if my plan will be lower than that one, that I have to compete with that plan, so I can start with the scratch. So promoters will give a smaller amount for the in the base resolution plan, and with a idea that if any person comes up with a more resolution, with a more amount of the resolution plan, then they can compete with that one, and they can come to that amount, so that he will not be losing the control over the company. So just to avoid that particular thing, just to avoid the promoters, that if they are giving a resolution plan of such a small amount, then that the public is giving more amount than the promoters given resolution plan, then the promoters will not be given a chance to modify their plan, and the plan submitted by the public will be accepted. So that will be a deterrent to the existing promoter, and they will be giving the plan which will be much better, which will be at the market value, at more or less the market value. So the plan will be much feasible one. Now whether this plan, whatever plan is being given from the public at large, if the plan is not significantly better, let's say the COC member has uh, taken a stake that if it is more than 10%, then only it will be significantly better. If it is less than 10%, then it is not a significantly better plan. Then in that scenario, whatever, let's say we have received 4 or 5 plans. So if we have received 4 and 5 plans, then the best of all those 4 or 5 plans will be decided first, that this person is giving us the best resolution plan. Then that best resolution plan will be competed with the existing base resolution plan, and the base resolution plan will be given a time that either you match with the plan, or we'll be going with that plan. So in that way, whatever resolution plan is there with us, either from the public or from the promoter, the best one will be chosen and that will be selected. Vesting of management of CD with RP we already discussed, so I'm not going further into the detail. Newly inserted section 67A, just to avoid the fraudulent activity of the CD, just to manage the PIRP so that they can defraud the creditors. So if any things are there, then the RP will be filing an application with the AA, and the AA will be imposing a fine of 1 lakh to 1 crore. And not only that, under section 77A, imprisonment of 3 years is also there. So that will also keep the CD and the financial creditor indemnified. So protection to the operational creditors. This is the vital thing. As regards CIRP is concerned, CIRP has section 53, although this section 53 is also there in case of the PIRP also. So what is section 53? That waterfall mechanism is given. First of all, the CIRP cost should be there. Similarly, here PIRP cost should be there, and thereafter, along with the workman dues, the unsecured financial creditor should be given first. Thereafter the unsecured financial creditor, and so on. The criteria is given. The same waterfall mechanism will be applicable to the PIRP also. And in case the amount of the resolution plan is not going beyond the second level or the third level, then the operational creditor will be getting nil, or say lower amount. So in case of CIRP, it is always accepted, and there is so many judgments are passed, and in each and every judgment is mentioned that operational creditor will get only the amount which is there as per section 53, and to the liquidation value that will on to the that is actually due to operational creditor by way of section 53. The similar cases is here also, that whatever liquidation value is there to the operational creditor, that will be getting. But under PIRP there is a switch over that one, that once we are going for PIRP, so the PIRP only between the promoters, CD, and the financial creditors. So what the PIRP process is there, if there is any impairment to the operational creditor, then that impairment should not be accepted. It does not mean that it never means that OC will not be given lesser amount. OC may be given lesser amount, but if in any case OC is given lesser amount, then there should be certain criteria, certain things which has to be taken on board. Number one is the liquidation value should not be more than the value given in the resolution plan. Number two is, if the resolution plan is giving amount or lower amount to the OC, and even the liquidation value is also not more, or say nil, then also the whatever control of the company is there, the control and management of the company should change. If the control and management of the company lies with the existing promoter, then this situation should not be accepted by the financial creditor. Financial creditor should see that if any impairment to the operational creditor is there, that impairment should also be having impact on the promoter, and promoter should also change, and all their position, they should denounce their position, and some other person should come in either fully or by way of matching contribution, say 10% or 20% diminution of control from the existing promoter, and 20% control should be there with the new promoter. New persons who will be taking charge of that one. Of course, there is again one catch. If there is any reason for not changing in the promoters, so that reason should be given during in the resolution plan itself, that although we are changing the OC, we are giving lesser amount to the OC, whatever impairment is there, that impairment is there to the OC, but we are not changing the promoters also, and the reason for having such thing, because whenever a resolution plan is giving impairment of the amount to the OC without any change of the promoter, then the NCLT will also not accept if it is satisfied that this change will negate the position, and if such changes are there, then the resolution plan will not exist or will not continue. Only in exceptional circumstances, the NCLT can allow a resolution plan which is having impairment to the OC. Although impairment to the FC will be accepted, or although impairment to the FC can be accepted, but impairment to the OC is not at all acceptable, other than having a change in the promoters. Now, if a change in promoters is there, or if a resolution plan is there, which is giving lower amount to the OC or lower amount to the FC, how can we say, like, let's say for example, OC is having a debt of say 10 lakhs, and the resolution plan is saying, it's not mentioning that I will not be giving you 10 lakhs. It's saying that I will be giving you 10 lakhs, but not in a month or so, but I will be giving you 10 lakhs in installment of say 3 years, within a period of 3 years. So will it be accounted for as impairment of assets, impairment of the OC claim? As regards this law is concerned, there is nothing mentioned in this one. It's simply because it's not mentioning NPV of the amount. It is simply saying whatever amount is outstanding as on the date of the start of the PIRP, that amount should not be reduced. But the NPV amount has not been mentioned. So by this definition, we can say that if an amount of say 10 lakhs is outstanding, it may be paid as on within a period of say 1 month, or it may be paid within a period of say 5 years. Then also if the NPV is not taken into consideration, then also it will not be counted as impairment of the OC. So that is the positive side in this one. Base resolution plan we have already discussed. Significantly better resolution plan, that also we have discussed. Base resolution plan. Now it's also as regards CRP is concerned, it's also same that the OC shall be paid in priority over the FC when the resolution plan is approved, and the dissenting creditors, if any creditor is there who is dissenting one, then he should also be given a priority over the other creditor who have given both in favor of the resolution plan. So that is also the same here. As regards the approval of the resolution plan is also same, that I mentioned that base resolution plan should be given complete with the plan received from the public. Now, in case of in case the resolution plan is not approved. In case the resolution plan is not approved, it can be terminated. The PIRP can be terminated, and the company will carry on as if it was never started at all. But the only thing is the next PIRP can start only after 3 years. But the other action can be taken now. The other actions will maybe by way of CIRP, maybe by way of SARFAESI, maybe by way of restructuring or other things. But the PIRP process can be terminated. It will not conclude the company into liquidation. It will not take the company into liquidation. Appeal against the resolution plan is the same like in the CIRP. Termination of PIRP we have already mentioned. Now the COC has the power to convert the PIRP into CIRP. That is also there, and it's mentioned that under what circumstances the CIRP can be taken directly to the CIRP. PPIRP can be directly taken to the CIRP. The things which are mentioned here, if there is a gross negligence, or if the COC member are of the opinion that the things are not going as they desire, and there are certain things which are being taken care of by the existing promoter in a wrong way, then they can simply resolve with a 66% voting share that the company should be transferred to the CIRP. And when the resolution is passed by the COC member, then the resolution professional has to make an application with the executive authority that we want to change the PIRP to CIRP. In that case, the NCLT can accept this company to CIRP directly only if the conditions which are required to be fulfilled for the purpose of CIRP under section 7, 9 or 10. All those conditions are fulfilling, then the company can be taken to the CIRP, and the process will start of the CIRP from the date of the CIRP. But whatever expenses incurred prior to the CIRP and during the course of the PIRP, all those PIRP costs will be part of the CIRP, and whatever PUFE transactions are there during the course of the CIRP, or when we take into consideration the CIRP 2 years prior to the date of the start of the CIRP, that transaction will be taken as 2 years prior to the date of the start of the PIRP. So all other things are same, but the only CIRP date will be changed from the PIRP date. Like say, for example, 1st of June 2021 PIRP started, and on 1st of August the CIRP started by way of change in from PIRP to CIRP. Then for the purpose of PUFE transactions, the 2 years will start from 1st of June 2021 and not from the 1st of September, 1st of August 2021. Few other sections are there which are similar to the CIRP. There is no change as such. Valuation of assets of the city, that is same as in CIRP. Two valuers are to be appointed, and the mean value of the valuers are to be taken as the liquidation value or the normal usual value, fair value. We have already discussed why the lender should be going with the PIRP and not the CIRP, because under PIRP the company will be having more amount and the business position will be strong, and the new investors will be here to coming in and take control of the PIRP cases and not in the CIRP cases. I think we have covered almost all the things which are different from CIRP and which are actually required for the PIRP. So if any question answers are there, we can start the question answer, or thereafter for some time, say for 10 minutes, we'll be taking professional opportunity for CA in the area of IBC.
Thank you, Vinay Bhaiya. Now I ask two participants if any question, then raise their hands or ask the question. I think Vinay Bhaiya, there is no any questions, I think.
Okay, so since we have completed our PIRP path, although the path is the PIRP itself is a longer time taking, but we have covered major items for that one. And now, as regards professional opportunities, there are vast ranges of opportunities available in the IBC, which we should know, which are there. First of all, in the CIRP, whenever a company is taken into the IBC, the process will start from the CIRP. It will carry on for liquidation. So we can be a resolution professional. We can be a liquidator. So these are the things. And it may be that company may come into the voluntary liquidation. Then also we may become a liquidator for that company. But whenever a company is coming into the IBC, there is a usual process of engaging a forensic auditor. So we may be a forensic auditor for any of the company which is being taken into the IBC, and we may become a forensic auditor. And the time period which has to be which is given under the IBC is a smaller time. So within a period of 1 month or 1.5 months, we have to complete the audit and we have to submit the report. So this is also in our favor, that within a given time frame, we'll be having all the reports and we have to complete our audit report and we have to submit the report also. Then whenever a case is coming into IBC, the resolution plan is used to be prepared. So in any case, in any single case, we'll be receiving not less than 3 to 4 or 5 resolution plans. So whatever resolution plans are there, those resolution plans are being prepared by outside persons. Even some persons who are not CA or who are not financial consultant, they are also preparing the resolution plan. And the resolution plan is a simple document. It's although a lengthy document, but it's a simple document, and we just have to prepare a gist of the financiers and the gist of the promoters, so that it can be given. And a few guidelines are there which are given in the IBC, which are to be adhered to. So with those guidelines, resolution plan can be prepared easily. So this is the one of the area where we have a professional opportunity for preparation of the resolution plan. Then we have the valuation also required herein. Valuers can be appointed, has to be appointed. It's a mandatory requirement, and of the 3 categories and 2 numbers of valuers for each category. And nowadays valuers have to be IBBI registered also. So the valuation is also one of the bright area where we should go ahead. Now, whether in case of NCLT and NCLT, both these codes allow even the CA, practicing CA, to appear before the NCLT and NCLT. So this is also an area where we can explore our professional excellence, and we can always go ahead with the consultancy, whether any process should be there, whether we should go ahead with the IBC or not, and if any case is already going on, we can provide our input to them. We can provide our consultancy to them. We can appear before the COC member by way of authorized representative also. Like say in a case of home buyer, there may be hundreds of home buyer. So one authorized representative should be there to correlate with all the persons of that particular creditor strength. So we can be authorized representative for that one. We may be a process consultant also, although process consultant is a very it is only to the RP, so it should be a you should have a good knowledge of the IBC law, but that is also one of the area where we can go ahead. And presently we have two new opportunities in the IBC also. Number one is for the pre-pack. We can be a RP for that one. We can be a consultant to that one. We can prepare a base resolution plan. We can provide the consultancy to the persons who are opting for the pre-pack resolution process, and as well as we can be a resolution professional for the personal calendar also. Personal calendar, as you must be knowing, that last year, I think last year it started with Reliance case. Anil Ambani case was taken into this NCLT, and thereafter Mr. Harish Sarve, the learned lawyer, appeared on behalf of Mr. Ambani. And then the question was raised on the start of the implementation of the personal calendar. Now, only 15 or 20 days back, one Supreme Court judgment is there, and whereby it is mentioned that personal calendar can always start, and government is right in start in start of the personal calendar, and whatever enactment, whatever notification has been issued by the government is the correct one, and there is no wrong in the constitutional validity of the law. So now the personal calendar will also be having a bright area that we can go ahead. So we have lots of opportunity under the IBC, and we have number of opportunities. If we are afraid of that, we don't want to be a RP because IBBI will always be behind us. Then also, other than RP, other than liquidator, also we have many things. We have professional things which can be taken into our mind. Other than this, we come across many persons, many companies which are coming into IBC for which no last balance sheet was prepared, say like 2014 or 15 or something like that. Last 4 or 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, balance sheet is not there in our file, or not prepared at all. So for those preparation of the financial statements also, we can engage with the RB, and we can provide our professional service for that one. Although our liability will be limited, as we will be mentioning in our financial statement that we are furnishing this financial statement only on the basis of the documents provided by the RP, and it may have certain documents which are not in the hands of the RP and not given to us. So we are preparing documents only on the basis of the documents submitted to us. So our liability will also be limited to that one. So that way we have professional opportunity in IBC related matters. So that's all, Rohiji.
Thank you, Vinay Bhaiya. Hello.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Vinay ji, for such a nice deliberation on pre-pack insolvency. We get very good concept and idea about the pre-pack insolvency. The deliberation is very useful and knowledgeable about how to appoint RP and what is the process of pre-pack insolvency. Thanks again, Vinay Bhaiya. Now I hand over the proceedings to Mr. Vivek Banka, Secretary of VIP Road Chartered Accountant Association, to give a formal vote of thanks to the speaker. Vivek Bhaiya.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Am I audible?
Yeah.
On behalf of VIPCA, I would like to thank our own CA Vinay Singh Ania ji for sharing his views on pre-pack insolvency and new opportunity. Really, the group discussion was very informative and interactive, and I am sure it will give the value addition to our professional knowledge. Thanks, Vinay ji.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks to all viewers for joining. Friends, one important announcement is also here. Another group discussion is on the 14th June regarding the voluntary liquidation under IBC, and the speaker is our own the Vishnu Kumar Tulsian, and the timing is 5 to 7 p.m. All are requested to join, please. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vivek Bhaiya. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Ravi. Yeah.